Well, hello everybody once again. It is great to be here. My name is Gordon Sanchez. Welcome to Winsome with Gordon Sanchez. And, I don't have my glasses today, so I can't see you, but hopefully you can see me just fine. But you know what I can see? I can see a wonderful IPA right here. It is called UP Balderdash. It is probably the greatest IPA in the upper Midwest. I actually paid about $600 to have it shipped especially to me, but you know what? Some things you just have to, you have to you have to go the extra mile, as it were, so that you can experience common grace. And that is what this IPA is. It is common grace. Well, I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you today. You are who I want to talk to you today about something very special, something very important, something very critical, something very crucial, something very agitative. And that is a question that I'm asked a lot. Gordon, I want to celebrate Thanksgiving because I am, after all, a part of this culture and this nation. And I always stop them there and say, remember, just because you live in the nation doesn't mean that you have to really have any sort of identity that has to do with the nation at all. But that's really what I want to address today. How can you celebrate Thanksgiving without becoming a white supremacist? And, I thought about putting together a list of specific items that you should follow, specific things that you should think about when celebrating. But you know what? Instead, I think I'm just going to go off the cuff, because sometimes when you're just enjoying, common grace IPAs, then you need to just speak from the corazon. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to speak from mi corazon. And the first thing I want to say is you have to be very careful about being thankful on Thanksgiving. Why? Well, remember, when you are thankful for something, and I'll just use an illustrative sort of example. Let's say you are gathered with a bunch of friends for a Friendsgiving. I'm assuming that you're not going to get together with your Trump-supporting family, but instead you're going to gather with friends. That's more appropriate. That's more inclusive. Your family, who comes from that little town in Kansas, really, you should just let them go the way of the dodo bird. But that being said, in your little suburb of Raleigh, or Columbus or Cincinnati or wherever it is that you live, get together with those bearded friends and those IPA six-packs and those vaguely acoustic worship songs. And, a common thing that will happen is you will go around and you will say what you are thankful for. Well, I would like to just encourage you maybe to consider skip over that if you don't want to be a white supremacist. And the reason is because you have to be, when you're being thankful for something, that means often that you're recognizing something that you have that somebody else might not. And the last thing that we want as Christians, as believers, as salt of the earth, as cinnamon of the Mexican hot chocolate, is to be non-inclusive. And so don't make the mistake of talking about anything that you might have that someone else might not, because then you may think that you're being biblical, or that you are being Christian because you are doing something that maybe the scriptures command you to do, like give thanks. But remember, the scriptures also command you to have a dream that one day. So you want to be careful about being inclusive, because that really is one of the prominent Christian values. So don't talk about anything that you're thankful for that somebody else might not have, and just skip over that whole thankful tradition. Now, another thing is you have to be very careful about the food. So how should you exactly present your food spread on Thanksgiving? Well, there's two pitfalls here. One is overly cultural cuisine. All right, so let's say you make the decision, as I have made the mistake of doing. I'm a sinner too. I make mistakes too. Let's say you make the mistake of preparing an entire Colombian spread. Let's say you're eating bandeja paisa.
The bandeja paisa is ready.
And you're saying, we want to be more culturally engaging, we want to be more culturally sensitive. And so you invite over Eduardo and Pronto and Dorito, and they all come, and you're serving them. And you end up culturally appropriating their own cuisine. Bandeja paisa es el plato nacional de Colombia. It is not the national dish of Estados Unidos. So you have to remember, to be careful of that. So really, don't put anything ethnic on your table. If you are somebody with skin that is light, if you do not want to celebrate Thanksgiving as a white supremacist, then only eat white food. Now that being said, white food is terrible and awful, has no spice, usually not even salt. White food is generally just cabbage thrown into a vat of water and boiled with a bunch of paprika. That isn't added unless you're from Hungary. So even that, because if you're celebrating and it's all white, you need to be asking the question, why is this Thanksgiving meal so white? So what should you eat? Well, what goes good with IPAs? Sliders. Sliders are acceptable. Chicken wings can be if you live in the Midwest. If you live in the Southwest, some forms of tacos are acceptable. If you live in the South, just skip food fast for a day because you really just don't want to be putting any food in your mouth. You could be storing up wrath for the day of judgment. Now, let's talk about other Thanksgiving traditions. What about the tradition of watching sports? Is that something that you can take part in during the Thanksgiving season? Well, I would say no. Why? Well, because sports are about competition, and competition reminds everybody of the free market capitalist system.
I think the first thing I would just want to start saying with that is the Bible has so much to say about economics, big picture, small picture, and so we don't have this narrow Christian view of the economy. We have this holistic view of, for an economy to be healthy, you have so many factors that need to be at play. You need supply and demand to be operating in a wonderful way.
Now, obviously, we have to remember that there are parts of the system that serve us well. That there's common grace items. Sometimes we have to go to Target. Sometimes we have to order from Amazon. I have to go to Starbucks at least twice a day. So there are some upsides to a free market system. But that being said, we must be very, very careful not to encourage competition. And watching a bunch of men chase a ball around that they all have enough money to afford themselves, that is not the definition of inclusivity, of restorative economic justice. Now, if there is somebody on the team who's going to take a knee, or the whole team is going to take a knee, watch away. That is fine. That is acceptable. That is biblical. But otherwise, you really should keep that TV off unless you are running reruns of Roots or 12 Years a Slave. Well, another thing I'd like to address is this whole idea of the Thanksgiving story. A lot of people ask me, Gordon, when I have my Thanksgiving get-together, should we talk about the Pilgrims? Well, here's the thing. We have, as Reformed Christians, a distinct Puritan Pilgrim identity. We are a Pilgrim people. We don't belong to a nation. Nations are an institution of the world, but we have a higher way. We have to remember that. And the Pilgrims saw that. They understood that. They dreamed of a shining city on a hill. Now, that shining city had slavery. It was misogynist. They were horrible to the Baptists. So really, I wouldn't mention the Pilgrims. Talk about how Reformed you are for a few minutes. That really covers that. Share some Matt Chandler sermons with each other, and you're pretty good. It's just as good as glossing over that story, as going over the history of the Pilgrims. One other thing I'd like to address is commercialization. We have to be for economic justice as well. It's not enough just to be Reformed. In order to have a full gospel view, to see the gospel in its totality, we have to make sure that people know we are Reformed, we are completely Orthodox, that we are inclusive, that we will not judge ever, and also that we're against commercialization. I'm so against commercial. Yesterday I was talking to a friend of mine. We were at Starbucks because I wanted their pumpkin latte before it totally goes out. But we were talking about how much we hate commercialization. And he had to go pretty quickly because his wife wanted him to pick something up at Target. It was the fourth time that day. And he was just telling me how much he says, "How long, O Lord? How long, O Lord? If we are judged as a nation, if fire and brimstone rain down on us, will it not be that we have taken these days, these holy, sacred days, and turned them into days of commerce?" What is worse than that? Can you think of anything worse than that? I can't, except for January 6th, which is my annual sackcloth and ashes day. But other than that, I thought that is so true, and I left because I had to go home and meet the UPS guy. I had to sign for a package from Amazon. been getting a lot of those lately. But, commercialization and corporatism is such a problem, and we have to make sure that people know that we're against it. So I would encourage you, don't take part. If it's Thanksgiving, don't go out. Don't shop. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule. For example, if there's a type of beard oil that you can only get for a decent price sometimes of the year, that is acceptable. If it's, certain, if you have to go get a certain type of coffee because it is fair trade and it's also ultra dark roast, meaning that they actually let the beans burn, turn to ash, reform them into beans, and then roast them again. If you could only get that coffee on Thanksgiving Day, well, by all means, common grace, you must do what the Lord has provided. You don't take His mercy and His grace for granted, for goodness sake. But, that is something to remember. So be careful of commercialization. Now, finally, I already addressed, should you gather with your family? Well, that's very simple. If they are Trump supporters, then no, you should cut off all communication with them, period, and report them to the FBI. But if they are sort of middle of the road, or even if maybe they're on the left, you must minister to them. You must show the love and affirmation of the gospel. And how do you do that? Well, you listen to whatever they say and nod your head in agreement, but then make sure that they also know that the church has been responsible for many ills and wrongs over the years. That is a great way to win them over this Thanksgiving. If your transgender half-sister is at Thanksgiving dinner and they're talking to you and they start going on and on about the problems with Christianity and things like that, you nod and you say, there have been a lot of problems, and I'm sorry. And then go get some more, go get another IPA, because you have now ministered to her in a gospel way, right? So that's what you do. Now, what should you do for, family that is far away? Should you call them? Again, if they are Trump supporters, then you should call the FBI, ask them to tap the phones, because you could potentially get a good payout yourself. I've looked into it. A lot of student loans, they will pay you big money if you'll, sort of try to entrap your own relatives. So that's, something to take into consideration. And, just as a side note, what about eating turkey itself? What about taking part in animal protein? Well, really that all depends. If you're breaking bread with Indian people, then I don't know. You should probably find out what they eat. It may be as long as you're at their house, it's fine. You just can't prepare Indian food for them. That's cultural appropriation. That's another video. We'll cover that in the future. Can you eat turkey? Well, if you're a Native American, it's really dicey territory, because also you want to be very careful about accidentally kind of drifting into the nationalism, and this is something that the entire country does, so you don't want to do that. So, you know what? Get a Cornish hen. Gordon out.